All right, everyone, it's 6:05, so I think we'll go ahead and get started tonight. My name is April, and I've got Cindy Cohen, the Travel Ninja, as well here tonight. And we're the Travel Collective. We have several different meetup groups, but we've come together and we're doing a series of online presentations about a variety of locations. So if you're a Travel Ninja meetup group, thank you for joining us, and you can see the upcoming schedule. If you're at Tours for Women or if you're on our Facebook groups, any of those places, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I'm super excited to welcome Cindy. Why Paris, and what makes Paris so special for you?
Okay, that's a real good question, and actually, we've gone over these questions together beforehand, and I had to spend some time really thinking, like, why and where did this love of Paris come from? I mean, it's not an unusual place to fall in love with. Lots of people would do that. It's, I think, a common thing I hear from lots of people. Once you go, it's sort of a magical place. But I know my draw to Paris and to France was through my high school French teacher. So I had the most amazing French teacher in high school. It was a gentleman and was a male French teacher, which was I had previously had a female teacher, and I was not too sure this guy was going to work out. I really loved the class. But within a couple of weeks, he started doing these hands-on French culture sessions in our class. So we weren't just learning the language. In that class, he asked to borrow the home ec room, and we went in and made crepes, and we made
Oh my
French
gosh.
omelets, and he taught us how to eat French cheese. And it's the first time I ever had a stinky cheese in my whole life. And I mean, he said he would have taught us about wine, but of course that wasn't legal, but he didn't think that was a problem. He just loved France, and he loved the French culture. And he not only, again, taught us the language, but really made the whole place come alive and made it feel like a place that, I don't know, it's sort of like a Disneyland for your senses, right? All this stuff to do. And so then, still in high school, I found a way to join a summer abroad program with a neighboring high school. My high school did not offer it. And that's when I went to Paris for the first time. I was probably all of 16 or 17 years old. It was my very first time traveling out of the country. I got my passport. A big, very exciting experience.
Oh
And then
my
we spent
gosh.
several days in Paris. And I don't think that I realized then how magical it was. I tell stories, many, many stories. There's so many great stories from that trip that I was there. I was there only 8 weeks, but I probably have 80 different relationship stories and adventures that I had. It was just amazing that whole time. So
Well, 8 weeks, though, is a really wonderful amount of time. A lot of us, when we travel or vacation, if we're working, we're only given like a week, maybe 2 weeks for a spot. So 8 weeks, I mean, what a wonderful immersive time for you.
yeah, and it was immersive. We had, I think, 4 of the weeks I was with a family. So I stayed with a family, and that gave me a lot of local flavor, which was beautiful. And they were kind and generous and lots of great stuff. So, I mean, then once I had done that, I just, it was sort of part of my history, part of my childhood. I've been back a couple of other times, both taken my mom, and then, or I took my daughter first, then I took my mom. It's definitely a place to go either with someone you love. It doesn't matter if it's a relationship love or if it's just someone in your family. It's a beautiful place to share with people. And I don't think I could go back enough. I think I could, yeah, Paris could be on my list every year for sure.
Do you have a favorite season or time of year that you like to go there, or?
Um, no, I mean, because I don't think I've ever been in the heart of the winter. And so that might be interesting to see snow because it does snow. And
Right.
but I've been in the spring, the fall, and the summer, of course, because that was my first time. Um, yeah, I don't think that there's a favorite season. So I don't think there's any bad time to go to Paris is, I guess, a better way to answer that question.
No, that's good. That's great. Yeah, I mean, it is. I think it is one of those cities where there probably isn't a bad season to go to. But wow, what an amazing experience! 8 weeks, and to have that with that time period. What would you say are some of the best ways to get around Paris, like for a first timer?
Well, the beautiful thing about Paris is it's incredibly walkable. But I say that, and I also know myself and anybody else I know who's ever gone, with the end of the day, your feet feel like you've walked, across the earth, from one end to the other because you're so
Yeah.
tired. But the streets are really walkable, and I much prefer the walking just because you really get to see the shops and the architecture and everything from the streets to the street signs. It's amazing. But I also take the metro. I take their subway system. There's 16 lines along through the whole city. It goes clear from one end to the other. They're pretty easy to read because they're identified by number and color. So
Oh,
if
okay.
you know that, which number or color you're looking for, it makes it a little bit easier. They're not navigatable by wheelchair or stroller. They are, but not. It's old, so
Yeah,
that they don't have a lot of
right.
that. So I would say anybody who struggles with mobility or is bringing along a little person or something along those lines, they might want to look at something else. But for the most of us, the metro system is really quite workable and economical.
Mhm.
It also gives you, and I encourage public transportation in any city you visit, because I think it gives you a feel for the local color and what's going on there.
Right.
The Paris subways are almost always crowded. It's very New York-like in that people use it for transportation, and all walks of life are on the train. So you really get to see lots of different people. I've met some interesting people on the train, great people, good
Oh,
stories.
yeah.
So
Oh,
um,
nice.
the hardest part, I think, about taking public transportation, including the metro in Paris, is learning the system. There's a lot of really good videos out there, YouTube videos, and some conversations about that. I think that I would recommend anybody who wants to do that to watch that ahead of time.
That's a very good tip. Yeah, that would be
Yeah,
helpful.
because yeah, just knowing how it works, like where you put your ticket. The tickets in Paris are actually tickets, they're paper tickets, whereas most of the metro systems I've used in the United States, they have either it's a card, more like a credit card that you use. You buy the little card. Here I can
Right.
buy a pass and it's a tiny little ticket, like the size of a business card or smaller. And that's your pass for the whole week. So don't lose that piece of
Oh,
paper.
oh no. Yeah, that is kind of scary thinking like this one little piece of paper, if I don't put it in a safe place.
Right, because it'll just float away, or you might discard it because you don't know what it is if you're not paying attention. So yeah, it was that is if you so watching those videos and just kind of learning the rules of how it works, it will help. But we didn't use the metro system all the time. We probably walked more. I walked more than I would have taken that. But if you want to get from one end of the city quickly, you just hop on and go, the full distance and then walk around. So that's what I would tell anybody that's in Paris to do. I wouldn't recommend that you drive. Paris is similar to, a city like New York and Los Angeles, where if you're in the city, it's parking and driving is going to be difficult. Not that it's impossible, but just not
Right,
as easy it is in other areas for sure. Um,
right.
but you'll find you're on your feet a lot walking around, and that's the beautiful way to see the city.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right. So moving on to what kinds of places, do you have places or an area of the city that you would recommend staying? And what types of places to stay in?
Yeah, if I go for like I did with my mom and my daughter, where I really want to see those iconic, Paris locations, I would stay in the city center, which is in the first like 1 through 8. Um, what are they called?
I'm trying to remember if they're called zones
It,
or
there's a French word, but it's really the neighborhoods, and it has escaped me. I had it a moment ago. Um, and they kind of go in a circle, sort of like a spiral. So they start with 1 being like at the very center and probably the oldest. 1 and 2 are some of the oldest parts of the city, which, as you would imagine, then have some of the oldest architecture and
oh,
those
okay.
iconic places. And it sort of goes around in a circle. And the larger the number they are, then the further away from
Further
the
out.
sword
Okay.
source you are or core you are. So I typically stay, somewhere in that middle area. So I am walkable to things like the Eiffel Tower and Notre Dame and those kind of things. But I
Oh,
wouldn't.
Brian just gave us the word. It's
Very
arrondissement.
Yes, that's it. There we go. Thanks,
And I might
Brian.
not be pronouncing it right because I didn't take French like you did.
That's it. And I completely forgot. So that is where I would stay. I would choose those locations. I have in the past recent years done Airbnb. I'm a big fan of hostels, and I typically stay in hostels in most locations when I travel. But for Paris, there's a lot of reasons a vacation rental like an Airbnb is a better option, at least in my opinion. I like it because you get to stay in more of a local building. You're staying in an apartment or someplace that other people stay, so you're in
Mhm.
a local area. Um, the the architecture, I mean, most of those buildings and apartments are over 100 years old. I've had some amazing Airbnbs. Um, and
And then you
really
have like a little kitchen, I imagine, right? Or somewhere to
Right.
cook.
Yep. And you were going, that's right where I was going. And then the second reason is you have a kitchen because you have to eat when you're in Paris and not always at a restaurant. So you can go to the little market down the street and buy a baguette and butter and oh my God, the butter. And then, and maybe some produce or whatever. And that's, you can, I mean, I could eat that bread and butter for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah.
and and a little bit of cheese and a bottle of wine and just like sit and look out the window of your view of the Airbnb. I mean, it's just that right there is an experience. So versus staying in a hotel where you just have a room with a bed. I'm sure there's some beautiful hotels, but since I went when I was in high school, I have not stayed in a hotel in Paris. I would stay in an Airbnb or a vacation rental for sure. Um, just to have that kind of local experience and feel more like I live there. And
Yeah. Yeah, that
so
sounds wonderful. So which were are some places in Paris that you would say are must-sees, not to be missed, must go, in your opinion?
uh, well then, and I had a hard time with this question too because there's like a long list and we only have a half hour to talk.
I know.
But aside from maybe some of the, more traditional things, and like I said, walking the city is by far my favorite thing to do. And it doesn't really matter where you are in the city, just walking is an experience. But the Montmartre area, which is on the right bank of the Seine, uh, it's up 450 feet above the city. It's a historic artistic district. There's a big church, and again, that's another thing that has escaped me. I know it starts with a B, a white dome church at the top. But there's a neighborhood there at the top, which has got some quaint little coffee shops and restaurants. There's a whole square of outdoor square that has outdoor artists painting. When my mom and I were there just recently, that was the last trip I was there, it had just rained.
Oh, wow.
And we hiked up, which is another thing I would recommend that you do. There is a tram that goes up, like a functional tram that goes up if you
Huh?
can't walk. But I think walking up it is part of the experience because you get to kind of see how the neighborhood evolves. So we
Right.
walked up these narrow, tiny little, cobblestone streets with, corners that come to a peak, right? Because everything in Paris is sort of in this weird, it's not square.
Right.
They have
No,
weird corners, right? And so you're walking along, and then we got to the very top, and it sort of plateaus into this little neighborhood, just a couple of blocks or so. But it had just rained, so the cobblestone streets were, reflecting the light
oh,
and
wonderful.
the sun was setting, and there's this fantastic view of the city. Again, we were just mesmerized. We sort of just stood there and looked around. We walked, but we didn't want to walk where we would lose sight of the view, so we just
Right.
walked along the block back and forth a bit because it was just breathtaking. It's a walk. It's like you're walking right into a postcard.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
it's quite spectacular. And I do think that little hike up the hill, it's like I said, it's an evolution of the neighborhood. You start at the bottom, and it's sort of maybe some shops and stores, and then as you go up more, there's more kind of residential apartments. But these are old buildings that you're walking by, and this neighborhood is where Picasso's Paris studio is. There's a lot of famous artists that walked those streets, and you can really feel that history and that artistic history as you walk in that neighborhood. And I would say that if you go to Paris and you want to feel like, you know, the things you've seen on television or the things you've read in books about how Paris is, I think you can't miss that area if you want to feel that part of the city. So
That's
that's
your not miss neighbor. It does. It sounds like a just a photograph or a painting. I can just imagine it. It sounds amazing.
well, most of Paris feels like you're walking in a postcard. I say that a lot. There's most of it, but this particular, especially that night, and I would suggest going either at sunrise or sunset when the sun is, you know, when the light is its, you know, perfect state. With that view of the city, it's a breathtaking view to see.
Wonderful. So, was there a travel mishap of some kind or some experience to share that would help our listeners in case, while they're planning or while they're there, something that happened to you that they might learn from?
I have a number of interesting stories in this arena, but I'm going to go with the more recent one, and that was when my daughter and I were there a couple of years ago. We because I've been many times and I love the city, I didn't do what I typically do, which is I typically do the research on the locations we want to go, and then I will look up online on the metro on how to get there. Can we walk from where we're staying, or do we have to take the metro? And if we do, you know, I typically check all this out, you know, the week before the
Prior.
trip. And I just scribble some notes on it, which is like, you're going to take the number 2 and you're going to head this way. And then you have to walk a bit, like, and I just make those
Right.
notes to, if you're going to go here, this is how to do it. And maybe do these 2 things together, you know, that kind of thing. But we really didn't do that that time. And because I didn't do that, we didn't know that there were several stations that were closed.
Oh no.
So, so we get there and, you know, we go and hop on or we go to the train station to hop on, and they're telling us the station is, you know, you can't, that train's not running from the station at all, and not today, but the whole week. It's not happening.
Oh no.
And so we were, you know, walked out and had to go back up and try something else. And there were several, these were construction activities that were happening. I think they're doing a number of things, or have been in Paris. And so there were a number of stations that were either closed for like the whole week or for starting tomorrow. I know at one point we found ourselves, we went on our destination, but when we returned, the station that we had previously gotten on at was closed now.
Oh no.
So, so we were forced to ask a lot of questions. But we of course navigated it. We walked a bit more that day than we had planned.
Right.
Our journey took us a little longer than we had anticipated. We were forced to interact with a lot of more locals because we talked to people to ask questions. And in Paris, the metro, there's a lot of support there in those larger stations. So there's even English speaking assistants, aides
Oh
that are
good. I was
walking
just
around.
gonna
Yeah.
ask
So,
that. Yeah.
but because of this thing, they were busy. So sometimes we didn't get a chance to talk to them. So we were talking to locals. And that was a bit of a struggle. So I think my definitely lessons learned with that is to do that. I do think if you take a look at, if you're planning to take the metro, check ahead of time to make sure there's no construction or outages or some weird holiday that's happening that's going to mean you can't take it that day. That was like I said, it wasn't the end of the world. We navigated around it and we laughed a lot about it, but it was also not as easy, and I could have done better had I done that research and checked
Right.
ahead of
And
time.
it can, if you were by yourself too, it might be really frustrating or it might, yeah, give you extra anxiety that doesn't need to happen.
Yeah, and had we had a timeline, like had to see something today because we had, you know, work tomorrow, it would have maybe potentially messed something up for us. So we were truly on vacation, so we were being very leisurely, so it didn't stress us out too much. But yeah, that would be something I would say, to check in on those things.
Okay. I don't think I asked you about food, and I'm not sure it was on the list of quote questions, but Paris is well known for its food. Are there any must eats? Because you and I
Right.
know both share a love of food, as most people I think do.
Bread and butter.
Okay.
And I asked someone else this recently, and they didn't know you could get such a thing. But in Paris, and I'm sure all of France, and maybe other places in Europe, they have the sea salt butter, but
Oh,
it's not salted butter. It is butter with salt in it. It's actually crunchy salt.
oh, yeah, I
And
wasn't aware of that.
I'm describing it, and you may think that sounds weird and super salty. It isn't super salty. Um, it is salty butter, like you would imagine, but that crunchy, it's just, I was amazed. I have not found it. I have heard that there's places I can buy it here in LA because it was spectacular, that butter with the baguette.
Yeah,
Um, and just get one every day and eat the entire thing and then go get another one. That they don't last long. They get hard too fast. So just don't be shy. You eat the whole thing. Uh,
right. Well,
and I do think you have to do your research on the food. I've seen this happen both to me and other folks who've gone, because there's a lot of different kinds of food, and if you don't like everything or you don't like a lot of sauces, you might find you ordered something you don't like,
oh,
right?
right.
And so
Yeah,
the food is fantastic, but if you are particular, right, you need to
right.
know what it is you're ordering. So, checking out the kinds of things you want to try if you're a foodie, and picking those. I know I had my mom and I had a lot of discussions about food because she didn't want to, I don't want to eat that. I don't know what that is. So there was a little bit of that going on. And I think had I done maybe a better job of educating her about what the food was, she might have tried more.
Right.
So, and I've seen other folks say the same thing, but if they're not familiar with it. I'm up for anything. I think we've talked about it. I've eaten crickets and alligator. I'll eat anything. Just bring it over. I won't like it, but I will try everything. um,
Right.
but they don't eat in the same way we do, right? So they eat leisurely too. That's another thing. So I definitely I
Oh, that's an
enjoy
important tip. Yeah.
part. Yeah, I enjoy that part of France and about Europe as well. Just that you're not rushed to move along. So I can't think of a specific dish that I would eat, but as you can imagine, anything in that pastry section is
Oh,
going
I
to be
know.
great. And you pretty much have that every day, because you're there. And the coffee is good. I really enjoyed the coffee, that for sure. And their dairy products, not just cheese, but milk. I don't know what it is. I think that those things are better in France also. It's probably their agricultural system.
Yeah,
But
it must be something, or just yeah, different air, different grass, different.
right, I definitely noticed that the milk had a better taste and those kinds of things. And I think it must have to do with that, milk and cheese and so forth. So but I'm a big like go to the grocery store and just buy stuff I don't know what it is and take it home and figure it out. And I like doing that when I travel. Paris is not alone in that. I do that everywhere.
And I think if I recall, it's been a while since I've been to Paris. There quite a few little neighborhood markets, more so than you would say in LA. I don't think we quite have that kind of like market on the corner culture if you're out in LA so spread out and stuff and that type
Right.
of
Well, the I don't believe the French are big fans of things like the supermarket. So that is, you're not going to find a market that sells everything. There might be a few little grocery stores that sell a variety of things.
thing. Hmm.
Uh, and there are a couple I found a few last time I was there that were like, I mean, they're tiny. They're the size of a large 7-Eleven. But
Right.
it's good food. It's a grocery store kind of thing. It's a little neighborhood store. But you're certainly not going to find any of the supermarkets. I wouldn't think there'd be a supermarket in Paris anywhere, at least not in the city center area. And you are going to find a lot of markets, like fresh fruit markets, bakeries, cheese markets, and as I said, that's part of the fun. Is just kind of popping
Yeah.
if you're doing that. I'm just going to walk from here to there. You're going to see all kinds of stuff. You want to go in and just buy cheese and bread and
Yeah.
apple. And I know my daughter and I stayed at an Airbnb in at the corner. just at, we would come down the stairs out the door, and two buildings down on the corner was this market, and they put all this beautiful fruit like out into the street.
Oh
And
my goodness.
it's in bins, and it feels like a farmer's market, but it was open every day. It's their market, and we got a lot of stuff there.
So
And
that
not
sounds
even that we
fabulous.
needed it. It was just too pretty to walk by and not buy something.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, Cindy, we're at 6:30. So does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask about Paris? I'm looking. Brian has been very good about sharing the words arrondissement, and he
Oh, the
typed
butter.
the butter. Yes, which I'm not like I said, my French is no good, so I'm not even going to
Yeah.
attempt to pronounce it. But
I
that's wonderful to share that.
Yeah, I have to find it. It's quite amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm not seeing any questions, so
It's okay.
yeah, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight.
There we go. Unmuted. Oh,
Oh, did you have a question?
sorry. Yeah. So are there any specific like this is the food one has to try, or specific areas like this is the museum you got to see or the theater you got to go to, and if you miss it, you kind of missed Paris? Is there anything like a big thing that maybe we don't know about that's the thing?
Um, that's a good question, Matt. And like as you said, the several words there, you're like the museum or the theater. I'm like, I can think of so many, but and I can think of different types of things that I've done. But I think some of it's more personal of what you're interested in. I mean, I was talking about, sort of the artist district area, and that's very interesting to me, and that sort of art history. And there is a couple of museums up in that area that are quite spectacular. I cannot think of the name of the one, but in the Montmartre area, there's one that there's some Picasso information and history about the artists that lived in that area at the time. And I believe you can see, if not only from the outside, but maybe go inside and see Picasso's studio. Those are the kinds of things I would do for sure. But like a Moulin Rouge show, a Cabernet show, that's something that lots of people do. I've never done that. I would imagine I would love it, but it's just not been something that's been high enough on my list when you're picking out of the 100 of things you want to do. The Louvre is what everyone says to go to, and there's a lot of stuff there right now. It is so busy. I would go to any other museum but that museum.
Besides the Louvre?
Yeah, it's so busy. I mean, every time I've gone, you can't even walk. It's like shoulder to shoulder people. I don't feel like it's a museum. I'm going to pause and be fair. When I go to a museum, one of the things I love about a museum is there's space to breathe and to take in and to process the art that you're looking at. And when you go there, when you're at the Louvre, and I've, again, haven't been in the heart of winter, so maybe it won't be as busy in the middle of the week in the November timeline. But having so many people around makes it difficult to appreciate and enjoy the art. There's the d'Orsay Museum, which I think is right across the river, and I would say definitely that's a better option. It won't be as busy. There's some really great pieces there. And there's a couple of historical museums along the city core area near Notre Dame, which are also very good to see. I would go to anything else other than that if you've already been to been to the Louvre. I mean, most people need to go because you have to check it off your bucket list. You need to stand in front of the Mona Lisa and see it and all of those things. But that experience is, for me, it was more of a check it off the bucket list thing. It wasn't something that I really truly enjoyed. Because I didn't get to have my space and my time. So, and I've not done a ton of theater, but the opera in Paris is supposed to be spectacular. I've not done a ton of theater there, but I do like small theater, so I would probably be in that look for those types of things, Matt. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. I'm
Okay.
wondering if the theaters have super titles or something like that for those of us who don't speak French a whole lot?
Hmm.
I say this a lot to people when I go to see movies and I go to theater and I watch it in the language I don't understand. And I don't worry about subtitles and I don't really care.
That is awesome.
And I think
Yeah,
that,
for theater, I think that would be beautiful. Just take in
yeah.
what you can take in.
And even with the movie theater, like I've done that. I've gone to a movie theater. I can't remember where I was. I may have done it in Cuba, but I don't know, have any idea what they're saying on screen. But the audience reaction, and then you can watch the body language on the film. I think it's there when you see both live theater as well as going to a movie theater in a different country. Movie theater is interesting because they have different cultural norms in the way that they behave in a theater.
Hmm.
So some countries are more talkative than they are. I know when I went to a movie in Paris, and they don't leave that space that we do in the auditorium between each other. They think it's rude. So if
Oh, really?
yeah, so if you go, like if I were to walk in and say I want to sit in the middle, middle of the row,
Right.
with what we want to do, right?
Right.
And then somebody, and let's say the row is completely empty, it's just me and somebody else. The next person who comes in, if they also want to sit in the middle of the row, they will sit right next to you. They will not leave a space.
Huh.
Because it's rude, because now there's a bunch of empty single spaces.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
and I didn't learn, I saw that happen a few times, and I talked to somebody and they said, that's because it's rude. And I was like, you're right, it's rude. And we've been doing it wrong all along, right?
Right.
But I do think that doing those experiences, it's not about what's on the screen necessarily. Sometimes it's about the whole other part of the experience and what you pick up from the way
And
that.
learning that. I mean, I didn't know that, and I've been to Paris. I didn't even
Yeah. So I didn't know what the movie was about. It was a love story of some sort, I could tell, but I didn't know anything else. But I did learn that. You're right. And when I was in Vietnam, I saw the water puppet theater. I think I talked to somebody else about that, and there's no dubs, there's no English version of that either. But you could tell what was funny and what wasn't without the language. So, all
That was a
right.
good question, Matt.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so I think that wraps it up for tonight.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And next week I think it's Alaska we'll be talking about.
Wonderful. Yay. Okay.
Yay. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And please check out the Travel Collective on Twitter. We have a Facebook page, I believe we've started. We're trying to get everything kind of collaborative on those pages. And leave a comment on Travel Ninja for those of you that joined from that group. That's really helpful to just give some feedback and let other people know that they missed a really great experience tonight. So thanks again.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.